Gamers. You know what really gets me going? Really keeps me up at night, keeps me thinking? This game right here. Tears of the Kingdom. Most recent 3D open world Zelda game. The latest Zelda game to date. That's a lie. Echoes of Wisdom is a thing, but I have not played it yet. So, do I even really need to get into my history with the Zelda games? I've played them all, except for this one. Still haven't really played this one. I've played it, just I haven't completed it, and I haven't seen it all the way through. So frankly, it doesn't really count. But I've played them all, I've seen them all. Wait a minute. I haven't finished this one either. Playing through this one currently. But this is like my favorite game. This is like my favorite game of all time. This is an all-timer. Anyways, I've played most of the Zelda games. I don't have physical copies of Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask to show you, but I swear to you that I've played them. There's evidence. But essentially, Zelda is a series that's very near and dear to my heart and to the hearts of many a gamer out there. But surprisingly, it was kind of a contained community, a gated community, if you will. It was a series that was really big, and a lot of people thought it was kind of bigger than it was, but it wasn't really the biggest thing ever. And then it became the biggest thing ever when Breath of the Wild released. It kind of changed everything in a very quick span of time, and it didn't really register because, you know, I always thought Zelda was like the most popular thing ever. When Skyward Sword was coming out, I was hype about that shit, and then I went on to, you know, like I said, play it, but never complete it. Am I a fake fan? But Breath of the Wild. Oof. This game came out a couple of years ago. This game came out in 2017, which is way longer than I thought it was. But upon this game's release, we did see the shift of the Zelda series, going into a much more open world exploration-based focus rather than the linear, story-driven, and dungeon-focused 3D Zelda games of the prior decade. And needless to say, everyone was pretty down with what they were serving up, in this iteration at least. But the further we go, the further in time things get, people start to pick the game apart. They keep on playing it and replaying it. A lot of people say, hey, you know, maybe telling your entire story through flashbacks isn't really the way to go. And maybe some of this story could be a little more fleshed out. Maybe we could have like some big story events happen in the present rather than just the beginning and the end of the game. Maybe weapon degradation is just kind of hindering the gameplay rather than making me seek out new weapons. I kind of just find the coolest weapons and then I'm scared to use them for free over them just shattering on me at a moment's notice. It was a vast and extremely exciting world for the time, but over time, a lot of Zelda fans began to miss that original linear 3D style. But nevertheless, in 2019, which is now like 6 years ago, Tears of the Kingdom was originally announced. Now, when this game was announced, I was very excited, but I knew that it wouldn't actually be coming for quite a while. So I kind of tempered myself. I thought, what could they really be doing next? This is a direct sequel to Breath of the Wild. We don't really get direct sequels to Zelda games very often. Ocarina of Time to Majora's Mask is probably the most direct sequel we have, but I mean, there was the 2 DS games, and I mean, even Phantom Hourglass was a sequel to the Wind Waker. Yeah. I mean, people don't really harp on that fact too much, because mainly I don't think people care about Phantom Hourglass that much. The wait for Tears of the Kingdom was long. I mean, people were already completely re-examining Breath of the Wild at this point. And, you know, the thought of Breath of the Wild 2, when we were going to see more information about it, when we were going to see that next trailer, it was kind of sparse for a few years. Granted, we did get Zelda Muso 2, aka Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, in the middle of all of that. But, like, I don't know how many people really cared. I mean, Age of Calamity is, in my opinion, not a great game. It's not even a great Warriors game, in my opinion. I mean, there's only a few of those, I think. Pirate Warriors 1 was pretty cool, but Pirate Warriors 2 was terrible. What can I say? It was the worst game I've ever played. When did we actually get our first real trailer for this game? I feel like it was around 2022, maybe earlier in the year. I specifically remember there was a trailer, which I think was the second trailer near the end of the year, where they did announce the name Tears of the Kingdom. I wasn't really following Nintendo stuff at the time, so I don't actually remember that much of really what happened in that like 2020, 2022 span of time. But I specifically remember in early 2023, the lead up to the third trailer was kind of whack. Like, this game's marketing just seemed odd. Like, they weren't really showing much. It looked very, very similar to the original Breath of the Wild, and people weren't all that excited. You'd think that the sequel to one of the most critically acclaimed, genre-defining games of the past few years would have so much more hype behind it, but everyone seemed very, very tentative about Tears when it was releasing. This is because the game just didn't seem like it was adding too much to improve the experience or even justify it being a sequel, rather than some kind of expanded story DLC, which Breath of the Wild already had, but all our hopes and dreams were essentially fulfilled by the third trailer. It was the most bombastic, epic trailer you could ask for. There was story cutscenes, there was events happening in the world, there was completely new stuff we had never seen before. It just looked so cool. We heard new voice acting. We got the reveal of Matthew Mercer playing Ganondorf. That was just absolutely insane. And so now everyone was thoroughly hyped about the game. Everyone was so ready after that third trailer. That was the push that people needed to actually be excited about this game and actually pick it up on launch. Because I really feel like before that trailer, a lot of people were just way more apprehensive about the game than after the trailer. It had one of the most puzzling marketing campaigns I can think of in recent memory. But granted, once the game was actually coming out, it seemed to be doing really well. Despite the mixed messages of the marketing and the shift in expectations and the increased $70 price tag for a Switch game, people still bought this thing in droves. It sold like 10 million copies in its first weekend. It was absolutely insane. And I got it on release and I played it for, I think, literally 10 hours straight on day one. And I have to say, even though I was one of the people that had major problems with Breath of the Wild, I absolutely adored Tears of the Kingdom when I started it. But that's all in the past now. I basically did my entire playthrough in 2023 and have only returned to the game here and there for certain side quests. But as far as the main game experience goes, I've had a lot of time to sit and think about it and ruminate over how I feel about it. And unfortunately, I have to say, it might be one of my lower ranking Zelda games overall. Now, of course, this is not to say that this is a bad game by any means. I mean, I think pretty much all Zelda games have qualities that make them great games. But Tears of the Kingdom, I think it does exactly what we all feared that it would. It just doesn't do enough. It doesn't necessarily justify an expansion on Breath of the Wild. It doesn't necessarily justify its $70 price tag. That is not to say it's not a great experience. It's just lacking in a few major areas. I think the biggest thing going from Breath of the Wild to Tears of the Kingdom is we wanted to see major improvements. Now, I think there are some pretty substantial improvements, like all of the arm abilities as compared to the Sheikah Slate abilities. I think they're all much more fun to work with. I especially loved the one that Ascend, is that what it's called? Ascend, where you can go through the fucking ceiling? That was cool. That was extremely helpful. That made the whole game world come to life in a way that Breath of the Wild never did, because it made exploration so much more intuitive and free-flowing. And it seemed like there was a lot more to find. In Breath of the Wild, the joy of exploration was just going around the world and seeing whatever was there. It really didn't matter what was there. It was just such a new experience, and it was just so vivid that it was enjoyable no matter what. I barely did side quests in that game because I was just genuinely having a fun time walking around. But in this game, I was 100% quest driven. Every single moment of gameplay, I wanted to be doing a specific task, not lose myself in the world, because I was on a mission. I was there to get things done. Things like weapon durability, climbability of cliff faces, especially when raining, and a lot of little grievances with Breath of the Wild remained pretty much unchanged. Yeah, sure, the fuse ability does help with weapon degradation and does add a lot to the mechanics of using different swords and shields and arrows, but its execution leaves a lot to be desired. Like, yeah, you could put a lot onto your sword and give it certain enhancements, but it's still gonna break pretty quickly. And there are a lot of items that are made specifically for you to fuse them, like the construct things that they drop, like the horns and the hilts and stuff that you're supposed to combine together. And that's all well and good, but it just felt like there could have been a little bit more to that, like maybe upgrading your weapons over time, like giving them more abilities, something like that. Just a more robust system that this game just still kind of lacks. Especially like fusing things onto your shield was always really disappointing because it never really gave you such a substantial benefit. And sometimes, let's say if you fused a cart to your shield to enhance your shield surfing, it just didn't really work out too well. Generally, I prefer more linear games. I like to kind of be on a set path, experience the story that developers planned out for me, and just see it through as it was meant to be. I don't necessarily like forming my own story or doing things in a way that wouldn't really be maybe in character, or maybe doing things that are anachronistic for the world. And this game seems to be kind of built on that. Like, all the shrine puzzles, I felt like I was just breaking the game to a point where it stopped becoming fun. You know, it was very fun at the beginning, like, oh, look at all this stuff I can do. Look at how I can just break the rules and, like, do this my own way. And then I was like, I feel like I'm doing this wrong. I feel like I'm not supposed to be doing what I'm doing, but it's just working anyways. And that wasn't really a rewarding feeling. Also, plus the fact that they brought back the shrines, and it's basically the same mechanic it was before. You just gotta do all the shrines, get orbs, you know, more health, more stamina. Just kind of felt like going through the motions again. And how about that story? Yeah, I mean, I think the story was better. This has become a much more divisive topic than I thought it would be. I don't know, a lot of people prefer Breath of the Wild story, which I don't think is a bad story, but it is definitely severely lacking in a lot of points that I think are really noticeable and really important to telling a good story. And Tears of the Kingdom does a better job. Like, it has a better go at it, but it doesn't necessarily fix all of the issues or rectify all of the qualms I have with the way that Breath of the Wild story was told. There is definitely more going on in the present with Link. He definitely goes through more story events than in Breath of the Wild, but still the same, the bulk of the important story cutscenes take place in the past. Now, sure, in this game, full spoilers by the way, Zelda goes back to the past, so she is influencing the events there, and a lot of people maybe had some kind of false hope that we would be able to play through those sections playing as Zelda. Now, that would have been cool. I just would have never really expected them to do something like that, so I didn't really get my hopes up about it. And the story was definitely well told, I'll give them that, but there was just a lot of parts about it that felt like they just needed, I don't know, more time in the oven? A second pass, maybe? Ganondorf's whole plot in this game seems to be just he's evil and he wants power. Like, it really didn't seem more nuanced. It honestly seems less nuanced than even, like, I don't know, Ocarina of Time, even. At least in Ocarina of Time, he was a schemer and he was a little stinker. In this game, he's kind of just big power, big muscles, big fucking, shattering spine ass. I mean, I like that detail a lot, He didn't kill her with, like, magic or anything. He just punched her so hard that her spine shattered and she died. Jesus. And the whole teardrop thing and the dragon stuff, that was great. That was really good. I really liked that. The whole geoglyph mechanic. Very cool stuff. Especially the way that the memories are tied to fully restoring the Master Sword. So you get the Master Sword right at the end of the game, and you can get the true ending that way. I thought that was always really cool. I thought the final boss with Ganon was one of the best fights in the whole series. It was just so insane. Like, the moment that he parries, like he dodges you and he flurry rushes on you, I was just fucking flabbergasted. I was like, he can do that? What? He's using my mechanics against me? So it really felt like this just toe-to-toe duel. Granted, it's way stacked against you, and it's really hard, genuinely. So I really, really enjoyed that aspect of it. And of course, the final phase with, like, with the dragon fight, I thought that was just so sick and such a perfect way to cap off the game. But I will say, kind of feels like this game went out of its way to return our characters to a sort of status quo for some reason. Like, Link just gets his arm back, Zelda just becomes her human form again. Like, shouldn't there be consequences for these characters' actions? Like, shouldn't Zelda still have some, like, I don't know, maybe dragon scales or horns or something? And shouldn't Link still lose his arm? I mean, he lost his arm due to the gloom, the doom and gloom in the beginning of the game. And then Rauru gave him his arm, but then at the end of the game, he's just like, no, have your original arm back. I mean, like, sure, I guess. My main problem with Tears of the Kingdom's story is not that it is uninteresting, because it's not. It's just that it gets to a point where it could easily go that extra mile and do something just a little bit more interesting to really leave a greater impact, where it kind of shies away and does something that I guess is more of what we expect. And I only think that this is such a big problem to me and a lot of other people because we expected a whole lot more, whether it be from the trailer, from the interviews, or just from our built-up admiration for the previous 3D Zelda games. I'm playing through Twilight Princess right now, and I think its story content has much more depth than anything in Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom. And it's kind of sad to see it like that, because, yeah, these are the two most recent Zelda games, and of course, I don't think that this is like how all Zelda stories will be told in the future, but it's just, for the better part of the last 10 years, we have gotten these games that I think are sorely lacking in some of the very important aspects that made the previous games so special. And of course, these games have an entirely new audience that some of them only know this style of Zelda. I really don't want it to seem like I'm clinging on to the past of the series, because I try not to do that. I try to look forward and see what the new games in the series can do, how they can improve the overall series and what they can add to it. But I do think that Nintendo needs to look back a little bit at the previous 3D Zelda games and take important cues from them, because I think there are many aspects of those games that just made them so much more special than Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Now, not to say that these games aren't special. They still have an amazing world. They still have great characters. They still have really great moments. They're just a bit sparse. They're few and far between. They're caught across acres and acres of land. And yeah, there's definitely fun characters, fun side quests, fun main story events in these games, but it simply feels lacking when compared to the older games. Especially when going from Breath of the Wild to Tears of the Kingdom, I think me and a lot of other people expected there to be more improvements. Like, it seems like it's kind of just using the same formula, adds the Sky Islands, which really don't add much to the overall game. It adds the depths, which honestly at this point make the game worse, because sure, the depths were fun for a bit, but I am not a fan of trying to, like, having to fill out the entire map twice, and one of those times being completely in the dark with basically just, you know, whatever light flowers you can find to light your way. It's simply not that fun. I don't like the depths. Maybe I could think about it more and give a much more in-depth review of the depths. But the depths is just one of those things that honestly, now when I think about it, I don't even want to go back to the game because I don't want to play the depths again. They're just not an interesting gameplay aspect for me. I don't enjoy doing them. Granted, I feel like Tears of the Kingdom definitely mended a lot of issues that Breath of the Wild had, but I think that it exacerbated others by not fixing them, making them a bigger problem, making people more aware that, okay, this is the state of Zelda, this is where it's going, and maybe we should examine it a little bit further to see how the series can improve in the future. Now, all this is to say that Tears of the Kingdom is a game that I definitely enjoyed and hold near and dear to my heart, and I would say it's better than Breath of the Wild, even though I probably had a much more magical, enlightening experience with Breath of the Wild because it was just so new at the time, and it was just a different time for gaming. Of course, it was like the Switch just came out. I was in high school. Like, it was just completely different. But even after all of that, I can appreciate the open world Zelda games, but I will always and forever go back to the original 3D Zelda games. I say original, but I mean, yeah, I don't know, 2D, 3D. I like the 2D ones, but I'm more of a 3D guy. Granted, Link's Awakening, especially the remake, man, those are good games. So overall, it's really not doom and gloom. You know, I don't hate this game, but I don't love it. And I love the other Zelda games. So I'm just hoping that they can take the aspects of the previous games that made us all love them so much and kind of mix that in, fold it in a little bit to the newer Zelda games to basically almost reinvent the wheel for a second time. You know, Breath of the Wild reinvented the wheel, and Tears of the Kingdom basically completed, expanded, perfected, whatever it could, but there's still a lot in that style that I don't really jive with. So I think that we need something fresh and new, but that something that understands, looks back on, and adapts a lot of aspects from previous games. I think that's really what I'm looking for in the next Zelda game. And I think Tears of the Kingdom is a great game, but it's an 8 in a series of 10s, if you know what I mean. Well, I gotta go back to finishing the 3D Zelda game catalog. I've only got 2 left. That's a tall order. You know, I love these games so much that knowing that I still have some left is a very welcoming feeling, I guess. Twilight Princess is a game that you'll definitely hear me speak more about at a later date, because it has honestly been one of my favorite gaming experiences of recent memory. I have absolutely loved it. And Skyward Sword is a game I will tackle in the future. Granted, probably not this version. I do have the Switch version. Well, that's about all I got. Peace.